All right, this is Jack Antonio here for Do You Know Jack, the podcast, and on the line with me I have singer Mike Demers of The Lonely, which I suppose, Mike, do you call it a tribute act? Is that the appropriate terminology here?
Oh yeah, very much so. Very much so. I think that we early on we went for the phrase celebrating the music,
Right.
because celebrating the music was more descriptive for us about how we felt about it than simply a tribute, right? It's splitting hairs, but no, we're more than we're thrilled to be able to play Roy's music to folks across Canada.
Yeah, well, that's what I was going to say now is the music that you are celebrating is Roy Orbison. So, I mean, before we go into a little bit more detail about what you do with The Lonely, I mean, let's break it down a little bit here, Mike. I mean, how long have you sort of been in the music industry? Because, you know, just from your pictures, and, you know, please don't take this the wrong way, but, I mean, it doesn't look like this is your first rodeo.
No, I've had a few horses shot out from under me, that's for sure. I started playing music in live venues in Edmonton and northern Alberta in the early 70s.
Right.
So through the bar scene and then into new wave music down in Vancouver. I had an original band that played in a club downtown Vancouver with the fellow that's now our manager for The Lonely, incidentally. Wrote music, continued to do that. I actually had an 80s tribute band about 15 years ago.
Oh, really?
But I was on Salt Spring about 5 years ago singing to restaurant crowds there. And more Everly Brothers, Orbison, early 60s, I played the Stronger the Response. So eventually I just thought, well, let's see if people will actually go to these shows. And the response has been overwhelming. It's been wonderful.
So you've only been in The Lonely for about 5 years, or The Lonely in general as a group?
We started about 5 years ago.
Oh, so like you are like the original singer, so to speak.
Well, myself and the drummer, we founded the band, and then we hired other local musicians who we had worked with in other bands as well. Already had relationships with, and that's what formed up The Lonely.
Yeah, and you guys are based out of Victoria, but you sort of travel all over the place. I mean, I know there's several Canadian dates booked, including Wednesday, April 24th, of course, at the E.A. Rawlinson Center for the Arts right here in Prince Albert. But, I mean, do you guys go stateside as well with this thing?
We're going to be in the Nova Scotia, New Brunswick area in May, and that's the first time we've been there. We've been to Ontario now 3 times, Saskatchewan a number of times. In fact, we played at the casino up in Prince Albert originally several years ago.
Yeah.
And we're really excited to hit the theater. It's mainly theaters that we've been playing lately. We do a casino in Edmonton, which we love. But for the most part, we're also in Melfort the night after as well, which is
that's right.
Not too far away.
There's pretty much the whole gambit of Saskatchewan possibilities. I think there's Melfort and Regina in there. I'd have to pull up the actual.
Yeah, I think Moose Jaw sold out. The Broadway in Saskatoon is pretty well sold out.
Right.
I'm not sure about North Battleford, but we've been there several times. My family's from Saskatchewan, and quite frankly, this time of year, I love traveling around the province. It's a real treat.
Yeah. Well, the people, in the prairie provinces are a little different, I would imagine, than your crowd is out in Victoria.
Well, in only so much as they don't live on the prairies anymore; they live here, like myself.
That's a good point.
People joke about it, but really, a lot of folks. They're coming out this way. They're wintering here, all over the island, not just Victoria. Comox, Courtney, Nanaimo, all the way down the island. And I tell you, there's a universality of the appreciation of Roy Orbison's music that's just astonishing.
Yeah,
I have not seen an area have less than an enthusiastic response to his music. I just haven't seen it.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think you've kind of answered this question as to, why you guys are traveling around doing the songs of Roy Orbison. But, I mean, with you specifically, Mike, I mean, what is it about Roy that entices and intrigues you, and what Orbison songs in particular do you really enjoy singing night after night?
Well, I've read interviews with Roy Orbison where he said that he really developed the songs in a way to showcase his voice.
Yeah.
And he did that. And as a singer, it's a chance for me to try to do the same, and present that to folks. So I have a tremendous amount of respect for what he does vocally, very much so. And I just try to make sure that I'm rested enough and humid enough. I bring humidifiers on the road with me, just because it gets a little drier. So I just try to pay attention to the details and make sure that every night I'm able to sing to that.
You know what, I was just, well, of course, everybody's familiar with the history of the Beatles, but, I mean, maybe not too many people in this day and age know just how significantly Roy's music influenced the Beatles. I mean, they pretty much were trying to copy him in the beginning, and there was a tour even in 1963 where the Beatles and I think maybe Jerry and the Pacemakers went along with Roy Orbison in the UK.
Yeah, and what's interesting about that tour is, when Roy got there, he was supposed to headline, but the Beatles replaced him.
Yeah.
So he was going to open for a band he'd never heard of. So the first show he played with them was the night that he met them. And then John and Paul held Roy Orbison back after 14 encores.
Yeah.
Roy Orbison had 14 encores before the Beatles at their height, at one of their peaks in Britain. It's an incredible moment, and it just, for me, is one of the many stories that shows how significant Orbison was in that period of time.
Yeah, well,
and continues to be, really.
You mentioned some of the ways that you prepare, but I mean, I guess, just like Roy's music is so into the collective consciousness of rock and roll. I mean, there's probably people that don't know who Roy is that could probably sing 2 or 3 of his songs. I mean, he has such a distinct timbre to his voice. There's the vibrato, and I mean, one thing I've noticed about his music too is there's just such a lack of strain in the upper register and such a sensitivity and use of dynamics. I mean, what do you find is the most challenging aspect of trying to emulate Roy?
The emotional side, without a doubt. I have people think that I have a voice like his. Sometimes they do, but for me, it's more, how am I singing the song? Am I actually feeling, the despair? And I have to say, with crying, I do.
Yeah.
It's not a fake. I simply think of that one situation which broke my heart, and everyone in the audience is doing the same thing.
Yeah.
That's why a song like that works, and that's why I think these concerts are such a thrill to play, and from what I hear, people enjoy them.
So then, of course, you hit all the iconic solo Roy Orbison songs in your set, I would imagine. But, you've also got some of the Traveling Wilburys stuff queued up.
Correct.
So,
yeah. We've become increasingly aware of a whole generation of people that, were really very dedicated and excited Traveling Wilbury fans, but not people that necessarily went back in his catalog. They might have known the top tunes. But
yeah.
What we're able to do is present to them the whole wide variety of crosses of, the career of Roy Orbison, including the Wilbury.
Yeah.
And we're hoping that it can give people an idea of how wide his breadth was in terms of styles and his ability to describe these romantic themes.
Yeah.
Not just the heartache themes, but the love themes as well. And how when I watch Roy Orbison sing on video, I'm convinced he's feeling all that.
Yeah, he certainly has a way of. Well, I mean, you mentioned the song "Crying." I mean, there's this certain almost weepy quality that he has to his voice in that song. That's just. I mean, I don't know if anybody could do that quite like he could.
No, but as a songwriter, I mean, Don McLean had a minor hit with "Crying," for example, right?
Yeah.
Which, it's an indication that the magic of Roy Orbison for me is that it's not just his voice, but it's his craftsmanship as a songwriter is astonishing, and that's why these songs continue to attract people and excite people about music.
Sure. Yeah. So now with the Wilburys, do you have a band member that can do their best Dylan? And, do you have another guy that can do Petty? And I think who else was in that group? Jeff Lynne?
Yeah, we share those vocal between the guitar player and the bass player. And we also have the keyboard player singing on backup. So, with the four of us, we're able to get a bit of a gang vocal going, which is a lot of fun.
well, then, and I mean...
Well, that's what the Wilburys did, right? As a group of guys just hanging out, just singing,
Yeah.
It's wonderful.
Honestly, I don't know if there could ever be a super group with more star power and quality in one place at one time than the Wilburys, that's for sure.
Well, in the end, what was amazing about the Wilburys wasn't necessarily their star power. It was how obvious it was to all of us how much they enjoyed it.
Yes, yeah, that's right.
Sincerely enjoying being in a band, making music, and sincerely enjoying it. And all the indications are that was for Roy Orbison a really, really special time.
Yeah. Well, and you guys also do some stuff by the Everly Brothers, right? And I think there's a bit of a segue that kind of happens because there was a connection between Roy and the Everly Brothers, if I'm not mistaken.
Oh, very much so. While Only the Lonely was Roy's first hit record as an artist, he actually sold the Everly Brothers Claudette, the use of Claudette, which was the B-side to All I Have to Do Is Dream, which in June '58 was a huge hit for the Everly Brothers.
Yeah.
One of their biggest hits ever. And so Roy, even before he became really well known at all, was already highly sought after and was trying to make it as a songwriter.
Yeah. Well, now how do you guys shift gears to the Everly Brothers? I mean, even with yourself as a singer, I mean, here's another iconic vocal group.
Yeah, well, we're really fortunate enough to have our bass player, Gordon Light, is a wonderful vocalist in his own right, and really, it's quite delightful to be able to sing the Everly Brothers, and we have a few other early '60s pieces that we bring out, which features sort of the double vocal treatment, and he's wonderful. It's been a joy to sing with him.
Yeah. I was just going to say now, too, I mean, it's not just about the vocals in terms of this music, but I mean, there's some pretty powerful and iconic riffs that happen in this stuff. So, I mean, again, like as a tribute act, I mean, how do you approach preparing there? I mean, I get the opinion just from watching the EPK that you guys are very well researched and, quote unquote students of the game when it comes to Roy and the Everly Brothers.
Yeah, one of the wonderful things that we discovered about Roy Orbison's recordings and his arrangements when we first started out was that, first of all, they're not simple, which is okay, but there's all sorts of conventions and things that Roy does, which is, very, very, really groundbreaking stuff. A chord change or the use of, like the riff in Pretty Woman is one of the very earliest, very powerful rock anthems, right? And so as we dug into it, we were all finding that, we were having to learn stylistically different ways to sing, different ways to play. Maybe not foreign to us altogether, but, to really to try to replicate the recordings as much as possible. We just didn't think it was our place to interpret, that's all.
Yeah.
Right. It's really amazing stuff to begin with, so just do that.
Well, now
basically is our approach.
Well, I can't remember which band member says this, but again, like just going back to the APK, one of them says you put your own spin on it. So, I mean, I guess as a tribute act, I mean, how much of yourselves are in this performance?
Yeah, I think that any performance band, really, it's the soloing that really allows the players to stand out,
Yeah.
We're often... We have use of a nice grand piano in many of these theaters, so our keyboard player, he'll certainly take advantage of an instrument like that, right, in different solos. So I think that's the way that the audience gets a better sense of the personality of the players, right?
Right.
Orbison barely spoke, and I've heard this from many different people. So, I'm not quiet, but we really try to let the show focus on the music itself rather than, I might mention something about the city itself that I'm in, but usually we just try to let the music speak for itself.
Yeah, well, and I mean, in the case of Roy's music, it does, that and then some.
Well, and for me, as a musician, rather than just, hold all my hopes on one or two big songs from a particular artist, Roy's got, in my esteem, probably 10 to 12 songs that rate at that level. And that's a pretty exciting show to be involved in when you have that many high impact, highly popular, successful songs to play.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. I mean, hopefully you can tell that, I myself am a pretty big fan of Roy Orbison. So, I'm glad that we were able to have this opportunity to, geek out about the music a little bit.
Mm-hmm. Well, no, I appreciate the conversation. I mean, playing his music is one thing, but, we go out front afterwards and the stories that people tell me about meeting him, it paints a very consistent and a very positive picture. The man that was, very unassuming and very humble, but he knew the power of what he had and what it meant to people.
For sure. In all your travels now, how many degrees of separation have you gotten from the man himself? I mean, what's the kind of closest you've come to? I mean, I know he passed away quite some time ago, but I mean, what's the closest you've got to Roy and his aura?
Well, in the early 90s, an original band I had played in the same studio where Katie Lang had just recorded Ingenue.
Wow.
And in fact, we were produced by the fellow that actually mixed Constant Craving.
Wow.
So, by degrees of separation, I think that's the closest one, but it feels like a pretty good one, not just seeing someone at the mall.
No doubt. Well, listen, Mike, I'm really glad that we could just sit down for a few minutes here on Do You Know Jack and just talk a little bit about what you do. Of course, the group is called The Lonely, celebrating the music of Roy Orbison, and Wednesday, April 24th, you guys will be here in good old Prince Albert at the E.A. Rawlinson Center for the Arts. And of course, you mentioned at some point, too, that you've got a slate of dates in Saskatchewan. You got North Battleford, Regina on the 21st, Broadway Theatre on the 22nd, Moose Jaw on the 23rd, and then again over here to the Rawlinson the 24th, and then down to Melfort on the 25th. Right. Can't forget about.
And then we're heading to Lethbridge.
Yeah.
We have a friend from Victoria who has a studio, and he does some great music on the prairies, Americana, and his name is Leroy Stagger. He's got a really fine studio that we're going to visit, and then we head home from Calgary.
Oh, that's great. Leroy's a great guy. Yeah, I have. Geez, there's a name I haven't heard in a few years, but he's
got like I said, he has a studio called Rebeltone, I think, out on a farm. He built a farm. So I've been, meaning, and now we have a day off in Lethbridge on this tour, so it's really something to look forward to.
No kidding. No kidding. Well, that sounds like fun, man. Like I said, it's been a pleasure and an honor chatting with you here today. Much appreciated for your time, sir.
Okay. Sure, I appreciate it. Thank you.
All right. Bye-bye.